Now, my wife's a doctor, and she said, I haven't got the faintest idea, but you can figure it out. And I said, how? I've seen hundreds of doctors. She said, perhaps you haven't seen the right doctor yet. Now, that was brilliant. And back in the early 2000s, something new was invented. Have you ever heard of the internet?
Dr. Alan Stephen Lycka was acknowledged as one of the leading cosmetic dermatologists in the world for 3 decades. After a series of events in his life, which we will be discussing, Dr. Lycka left his practice in 2019, and he co-authored the best-selling book, The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life, with Harriet Tinka. Currently acknowledged as a leading expert in the concept of living a fantastic life, Dr. Lycka is a transformational speaker, thought leader, coach, and mentor, and I'm honored to bring him to you today to talk about his life, his story, as well as the steps that you can take to live a fantastic life. Dr. Alan, it is great to have you on the show, my friend.
Thank you so much for letting me be here. It is my pleasure.
It's my pleasure having you. You are coming all the way from Canada today, right? Edmonton. We just talked about where that was geographically. And you've got quite the story, sir. And you lived a very successful career. You're continuing to work on your own accord to help people live an amazing life. And you've got quite the story for the reason that I can imagine at the height of your career, right? And just to make sure I have this right, you were, in essence, is a dermatologist. Is that like cosmetic surgery? Is that what you did inside of your career?
Oh, it was one of the things I did. The two things I did as a dermatologist that set me apart is I was both a cancer surgeon and a cosmetic surgeon. So I did a lot of great things to help people with their lives.
That's incredible. And you're continuing to do that. And when you were at the height of that career, though, you were walking around Disneyland. You tell this story all the time. And your foot literally started to flap as you walked. And obviously, that's not a very normal thing.
No,
And you told your wife that you'd get it checked out, right?
Well,
and,
you know, your wife gives you the ultimatum. You better get this checked out. What do? You get it checked out.
And when you got it checked out, you were diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease.
Yeah, I went to see a world leading neurologist, and the neurologist said, you better sit down when I tell you this. And I said, why? And he said, you have a disease that's going to kill you in 6 months, he said. And I said, is there a way to prove this diagnosis? And he said, yes, on autopsy.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I'm not going to die to prove you wrong. And so I left that meeting and I slammed the door. But you know, when you go through something like this, you go through a phase where you go through anger, you go through bargaining, you go through denial, you go through depression. Those are the phases of death and dying that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote in her book on death and dying. And you do, because you are dying. I mean, you've been told you're going to die. You've been told you're going to be dead in 6 months. So you go through all these phases. And I don't think they're phases. You go through them all at once. I was angry. I could have bit the head off nails. It was a time that my wife knew I was angry. My children knew I was angry. My staff knew I was angry. But, you know, I couldn't tell them what was wrong because I was supposed to be dead in 6 months and they might abandon me. You go through bargaining, you know, the phase where you say, oh God, please don't let this happen. I'll do anything if you don't let this happen. Yeah. But I didn't think God was listening back then. Later, I was to find out he was, but in his own way. You go through denial, you know, there's nothing wrong. I can do anything. But you know, my right foot still was a dropped right foot. If I didn't wear a right foot brace, I wouldn't be able to lift it up and I'd fall flat on my face. But then my right hand became involved and I couldn't do the things that I used to do. Now, I was a right-handed surgeon. Now that posed problems, but I was smart and I learned how to be a left-handed surgeon.
Wow.
I learned how to do things left-handedly. And I even developed instruments for a left-handed surgeon because back then there weren't tools invented that way. You know, if you're left-handed, you have to have left-handed scissors. Well, surgeons that are left-handed needed left-handed scissors, but they weren't invented yet. So I had to invent them myself. And then finally, you go through depression. Have
Mm.
you ever been depressed?
Yeah, looking back, I think it's easy to see that you're in that emotional state. It was very different for me. I wasn't diagnosed with anything, but I was very overweight. I was in tons of debt. I wasn't happy with my life, and it reflected in my actions. So looking back, I would say that yes, there was a period that I was depressed.
Well, depression is one of the worst emotions. I mean, you can stay in bed all day staring at the ceiling and not get out of bed. And you're just not happy. You can't eat, you can't sleep. It is a terrible phase. I call it the dark days. But, you know, I wasn't going to let myself die from ALS, which is a terrible disease because you end up gasping for air and you end up doing this within 6 months of getting your diagnosis. So I went to my wife and I said to my wife, "What do I have?" Now, my wife's a doctor and she said, "I haven't got the faintest idea, but you can figure it out." And I said, "How? I've seen hundreds of doctors." She said, "Perhaps you haven't seen the right doctor yet." Now that was brilliant. And back in the early 2000s, something new was invented. Have you ever heard of the internet?
A few times here and there.
Yeah. Well, it was primitive back then. You had to get on by dial-on connections. You had to put your phone on a cradle, and your phone would connect. It would go ria 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 for something like 15 minutes. And if it connected, you'd get to the other side. Now, back then, computers had no memory, so you had to communicate by languages like DOS and using primitive communications. And eventually you'd get on. That was very, very difficult. Now, I had friends that were nerds, so they helped to get me on the other side. Now, the internet then was like the internet that now. It had the world's best resources, but it was full of garbage cans, and you
Mm.
couldn't tell the garbage cans from the good resources. So I was very careful and I checked things out. And my friends helped to find a doctor in Colorado Springs, Colorado, who had a story very similar to mine. His name was David Martz. And David was on his deathbed a few weeks after his diagnosis. Now, David was so beloved, doctors from around the world were coming up to say goodbye to him. And a doctor from Texas came up to say goodbye to David. His name was Dr. Harvey. And he looked at David and he said, "David, there's something wrong with your picture." And David said, "Well, what do I have?" And the doctor from Texas said, "I don't think you have Lou Gehrig's disease. I think you have chronic Lyme's disease. I think you've been bitten by a tick. And I think if I start you on antibiotics, I can make you better." Well,
Whoa.
David said, "What do I have to lose? I'm dying." And David started on antibiotics, and a miracle happens. Just like Lazarus, he was like he arose from the dead, and within 2 weeks he was back to normal.
Whoa.
So I knew I had to get in touch with this amazing doctor. So I phoned every hospital in Colorado Springs, Colorado, the city that he lived in. And there I met up with him at the Methodist Hospital. And David and I talked for hours. And he said, "Dr. Lycka, can you come down to see me?" I said, "When?" He said, "What about right now?" I said, "David, it's Thanksgiving in Canada. My office invited 50 people over." He said, "Aren't there any planes in Canada?" He wasn't going to take no for an answer.
Okay, let me ask you this real quick. How far into this initial diagnosis did you start this conversation with this next doctor?
It was about a year or so when I was first diagnosed with ALS that I figured I had to go see him. So I got down there and he diagnosed me with chronic Lyme's disease. And that is how I'm still here today. I'm still living and thriving because he started me on treatment.
You were initially given 6 months to live, but at the year mark, you went to this doctor. Is that correct? It took a year after your initial diagnosis.
Exactly.
Were you questioning, I'm still here after a year. There's no way that this could be Lou Gehrig's disease because that first doctor told me 6 months. What's going on here?
There are some famous people that have been diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease that have been here for 6 months, years actually. So there, it's not always an exact science that a doctor can tell you you're going to be here in 6 months and dead in 6 months. I think you will have hundreds of people that have said that you're going to be dead.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. When you were initially diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's and you have all these incredible goals for your career, all these amazing things that you want to do, all these people that you want to help, and then you get this news that you've got 6 months to go. And it's like, whoa, like life flashes before your eyes, I'm sure. All these goals that you had go by the wayside as your life changes. How do you continue on a daily basis, especially in the field that you're in, where you have to give other people hope? You have to give your patients hope. You have to give your team hope. You have to be a leader for them, for your family, for your children. How did you continue on in the face of depression and those dark times that you mentioned? How do you do that?
You know, I've always been under the impression you have to live your life to the fullest and you have to do your best every day you can, no matter what's dealt you anyway. That's been my philosophy. That has been my story. That is what I figured I would do even then. So every day I'd wake up and I said, if this is the last day of my life, this is going to be the best day of my life. And this is the way I'm going to live it. I'm going to do things. I'm going to make things happen. I'm going to make it so it's the best thing so I can help my patients, help us things along. And I think everybody has to take that philosophy in your life. And it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens, which is extremely important.
It's amazing that you had that mindset at that point, because if it was the opposite mindset, it would have meant tragedy for the practice. It would have meant tragedy for the family and tragedy for your own mindset. Maybe one that was hard to come back from, even when you received the correct news of what was really going on. So I'm curious also, your concept of the future. How did your concept of the future and planning and goals change once you were told, hey, your life is cut short. You've got 6 months to go. I wish you the best. Yeah, obviously, the bedside manner from that first doctor wasn't so great. I think you mentioned somewhere. Like, how did your concept of goal setting change once you were given this, in a sense, ultimatum?
But, all of us have goals, and we always like to think we're going to be here in 20, 30, 40 years. But the answer is every day, we're only given today to work with. We're only given today to make it happen. Today is the day that you have. You can't do anything about the past. You can only envision the future. So you better make the best of today and fill in today with all the important things and do the things you can each and every day to make your life is one that matters.
Yeah, it's so true. I was talking with a friend. His name's Brian Brody, and he owns his own company, Mortal Up. And I was talking to him about this conversation I was having with you, because we just spoke about 30 minutes ago. And I told him a little of your story from what I understood of it. And he spoke of goals. He's like, this is why when I hear people talk about goals and future planning, he said, yes, there is positive merit and intention behind the idea of setting goals, because it gives you something to focus on. It gets you something to work towards every single day. It gives you something to get out of bed for. He said, but at the same time, you don't know, like what you just said, you don't know if you're going to be here 10 years from now, 20 years from now. But it doesn't necessarily mean you only live once, do whatever you want. He said it means more so these concepts that we've been talking about for a while, like Eckhart Tolle talks about the power of now, being in this moment now, feeling the air enter your lungs and go through your nose into your body, and exhaling and doing the simple things, raking the leaves in the yard if you're experiencing fall. He says that the to-do list is one of the greatest sources of stress, because you're always looking ahead, yet failing to be in this moment now.
Well, and I think that's important. You have to, most of us need a to-do list to make ourselves get going and moving. But you also should concentrate on the things you're doing right now to make it happen. And you should also look back at a list of the things you've done, because that list of things you've done is amazing. I mean, everybody on this planet has done so many things that's made them successful. Don't forget those along the way.
How often are you revisiting that personal list of yours? Because at this point, you've got so many different things on that list. I had to go through your introduction and really decide what needs to be in here, because there is so much that we'd still be in the introduction with all the different achievements and inventions and things that you've done. Like, how often do you look back at those things that you've created?
I don't look at it that often. When I do, I look at it with a smile, knowing that the things I've done, if I was to die tomorrow, I'd say I'd be really happy with all the things I've done. But I also use that as a source of motivation to push myself further and say, look at what you've done. Now, look at the things you're going to do. Look at the wonderful things you're doing to help people now. Look at the things you've turned the corner with, and look at the things you're going to help people with. And this is where I use this as a drawing point.
That's incredible. At this point, now that you've spoken to this doctor down in Colorado Springs, Colorado, he says, Dr. Lycka, you don't have Lou Gehrig's disease. You've got chronic Lyme's disease. He gives you the things to help you heal, right? Was it like your friend that you mentioned? Did you immediately see differences in your behavior and your activity and your body? Like, did you quickly see a difference once he helped you get on a new routine?
What it did was it abated the progression of my disease. I will always have a dropped right foot, and my right hand will probably never come back to normal. But nothing else has gotten worse. Nothing else has gotten to the point that I'd be worried about. So the answer is, the things he started me on has really stopped the disease's progress. So I'm happy with that, because what I have now, I can live with, and I can move forward despite having some disabilities.
Yeah. When you started that progress forward, how did your life change? I guess the question is, how fast did your life change, or your mindset, your attitude, once you found out that you weren't, in fact, on the road to no longer living? I guess we're always on that road, I suppose, but at least in that short span of time, how did you change?
At that point in time, you can decide to become bitter, hard, or you can decide to change your life. And I decided to give more back. I decided to give more back to society. And that was the biggest change that happened in my life.
And that giving more back, you co-authored the book that we mentioned. What is the full title of your book, so that others can go look it up?
It's called The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life. Two survivors reveal the 13 golden pearls they've discovered. And I met Harriet Tinka because I was sponsoring an event called Women of Distinction. And Harriet, an amazing world-class model, got to that event because she had a story similar to mine, but very different. She was a world-class model walking the hallways of New York and Milan and Paris, and she grew tired of that industry and decided to take up her second love, which is accounting. But what happened there is she got befriended by a person that was a psychopath who kidnapped her, stabbed her, and left her for dead. Now, Harriet ended up in the hospital, and in the hospital, she met a young girl called Amber, who was wheeling down the hallway, happy as a lark, in a wheelchair. And Amber had lost both of her parents and the use of her legs in a terrible car accident. And she asked Harriet her story, and Harriet was depressed and didn't want to do anything. And the young lady told Harriet she should be she was doing a big harm to herself. She was ignoring this thing as a gift, she said. She said, you should go out there and use your story to empower people. So Harriet applied for this award for women of distinction, not to win the award, but to meet me so that we could write this book together. She wanted to convince me to write the book. And
Wow.
that's what happened is we wrote the book together because Harriet pushed me that way.
What would you say was your greatest personal contribution to that book that you both wrote together?
You know, everything we did was like it was interesting. I'd start a sentence and Harriet would finish it off. Harriet would start a sentence and I would finish it off. So the way we decided to write this book was we'd concentrate on real neat things that we called our golden pearls. And our golden pearls are things we found in each and every one of us. And in each chapter, we had a dialogue on writing that chapter. So we decided to write the book as a dialogue. And Harriet, a reader is like the fly on the wall that's there and listening to us as we're writing the book.
Now, these golden pearls, I can imagine that you guys spoke of much more than these 13 things that are included in the book. How did you condense all of your learnings and experiences and journeys and challenges into 13 different points?
You know, we originally decided on 20 golden pearls, but then we put it out to an audience, and our audience said, Dr. Lycka and Harriet, please only put 13 in there, because they said there's way too much knowledge there. We cannot absorb all this knowledge. So we honed it down to our best pearls. And that's how we got to the 13 golden pearls we have there now.
I love that. That's super cool. I have a question about that specifically, but before that, you know, everyone's probably thinking at this point, like, okay, 13 golden pearls. That's a lot of different things to work on. And we've got a lot of people listening right now who they're doing well in one area of life. Maybe they have an incredible family. Maybe they're doing well financially. Maybe they're doing well when it comes to the relationships, whatever it might be. But they know and maybe have a voice inside their head that says things could be better, right? And if asked, would you say you're living a fantastic life? Many would say yes, but some would say no, there's something missing. Is there a specific place that you'd recommend people begin when it comes to living a fantastic life?
You know, I think people have to start with themselves a little bit, and they have to look at their daily routines, and they have to look at what they're not happy with. You know, there's many people out there that are in a job that they don't like, and they went through COVID and they don't like it anymore. Well, they want to move on to something else, but they're afraid of doing it. Well, they have to look at what they can do, and they have to look at their purpose in life. And I think that's a good place to start, looking at their purpose. And in my book, I have a chapter on purpose. It's a chapter, Golden Pearl number 5, called Intention or Purpose. And I start with the Japanese concept of ikigai. Ikigai is a concept where you look at yourself and you look at the things you love. You look at the things you can do. You look at the things that the world needs. And you look at the things that you can be paid for. And you take all of those and you put them all together, and that's your ikigai. And that is the place that people should start with. And you might not be able to figure out your full-time ikigai right now, but you could start with a part-time ikigai and see if it fits. And if that's what fits, then you need to move towards it.
That self-reflection is so powerful. And those questions that you just brought up, you got to start with you. What are you not happy with in your life? Look at what's going well, sure, but what are some things in your life that you're not happy with, right? We tend to find ourselves in these places that we've been in for a long time. And we just continue down that path. We've really forged those neural pathways. We've been in that job that we don't like. We're in that relationship that's not serving us, whatever it is. What are you not happy with? And then ask, what can I do? Right. So my question for you is, you mentioned at one point, someone asked you how you got into the world of health and with what you did as a dermatologist for many years. And you said, well, I'm not really sure. Right. I kind of found myself in that world. Did you know your purpose before you became a dermatologist, or did you find purpose once you were already in that role?
When a doctor goes into the medical field, they are associated with many different things. And you go through the whole spectrum of things that you're there. And, one Christmas, I was in a hospital and I was on the obstetrical ward, and it was such a busy time. Uh, and it was terrible weather that the obstetrician gynecologist never found their way into the hospital. So I had to deliver 24 babies in 24 hours. So I knew I was never going to be an obstetrician gynecologist because I knew that that was not my calling after that 24-hour stint. There were times that I work in the emergency ward and they would be terrible things. You would see terrible things. And I knew that wasn't my calling as well. But when I went into the dermatologist office, I found such amazing things and helping such amazing things in such an amazing way. I knew that was my calling.
You just knew. You tried many different things, and then finally, once you saw what was involved in the world of dermatology, you just knew inside, this is what I want to be doing with my life.
Exactly.
Would you recommend that others try many different things until they also find that thing that makes them, that sparks that fire inside of them?
Well, I think people should constantly be trying new things. I mean, they should be constantly volunteering and giving back to others. They should be constantly working in ways in other things than they do during their regular day. And that will help to spark their interest and help them to get to another level.
Well said. What would you say is what's the last new thing that you've tried yourself? What's the last new experience that you've had in your life?
I try to do something new all the time. One of the biggest things I love to do is live vicariously, and I read a lot, as you can see from my bookcase behind me. And I think book reading is one of the most important things that you can do. And that is one of the most important things you can do, is to move yourself forward with that. Public speaking, I love to do that. And that was one of the hardest things, because every time you're on a stage, you have to talk to your audience and commiserate with your audience. So just recently, I was on the stage in October talking to a seniors community because it was Seniors Day. So I was on the stage entertaining that community. So we entertained over 200 people that day, getting them into my message and to my philosophy. So I'm constantly doing something to help myself get to another level.
I love that. I love that you're practicing still daily, or as often as possible, what you talk about. And I appreciate you diving into purpose there as one of the golden pearls. We're not going to get into all 13 today. You guys can go grab the book in the description. Again, the book's title, for those listening, is The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life. And my other question is, if you could go into those 13 golden pearls and you had to pull out one other one that was instrumental in your own life, where you would have started if you could go back and talk to Dr. Lycka when you were in your 20s or your 30s, what would be the second pearl that you would give to the
Well,
younger version of you?
there's a great pearl in my book, and there's a little story associated with it, which takes about 2 minutes to do. Will you allow me to tell that story?
Please do.
Okay, the story is enthusiasm. And the person in the story is a carpenter by the name of Fred. Fred had worked in the same business for the last 30 years of his life, and he was tired. He didn't want to do it anymore. So he went to his boss and said, "Boss, I'm done. I can't do this anymore." The boss was taken aback. He said, Fred, you're my master carpenter. You've helped me build every house in our company. Can you stay for one more job? And Fred said, of course, he said, I've loved this job. I've never done anything else in my life. He said, the boss said, okay, build me just one more house. So Fred did it, but he did it begrudgingly. He dragged his ass to work and he barely got the job done. And at the end of it, he went to his boss and said, Boss, I'm done. Well, the boss said, there's a miracle, Fred. The house passed inspection. He said, we're going to have a party. So he dragged everybody into the office together. They popped the champagne. They had the caviar. Everybody had a happy time. And the boss gathered everybody around and he said, everyone, this is Fred's last day. He's going to be very happy, but I'm going to be sad. But he said, Fred, I have a little gift for you. He said, Fred, here's the keys to the last house you ever built. May you live in it with all the enthusiasm you ever did throughout your whole life. Now, I tell you that story because enthusiasm is the game changer. It's what you bring to the game every day of your life. And if you do that, you will truly make life an amazing, wonderful place.
I love that story. Thanks for sharing that. It reminds me of my father, actually, who is also a contractor. He's built many and many and many houses, and he's a very enthusiastic man who's a master at his craft, loved by his friends, always listens to others. Is there a key to enthusiasm? Is it something that you either have or don't have, or is there a way to develop that if you don't, quote unquote, have it?
I think you have to wake up every day and start with gratitude. I think you have to say, oh my God, what a beautiful day this is. I'm alive. I can put my feet on the ground. I have another chance to do a difference for people. I have another way to make the world a great place. Let me live it to all the fulfillment that I can. And that is the way you make gratitude happen in your life and make enthusiasm happen every day that you can.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. You've mentioned many of things already, and I'm curious if the answer to this is different than something you've already mentioned. But if you had to tell me, Brandon, there is one key to living a fantastic life, and all I can give you is this one thing, and it's your job to take it and apply it and use it to make a difference personally and or professionally. What would you tell me is the key to living a fantastic and extraordinary life?
I'd say, Brendan, you need to think of non-negotiables, things that you would never give up in your having that fantastic life. Now, for some, that's going to be their family. For some, that's going to be their job. For some, that's going to be their quest for perfection. But everybody has to develop that list of non-negotiables, one that's unique to them, and they have to stick to it, no matter what happens, because life is going to throw curveballs at you, and you're not going to give up on those non-negotiables if you have them firmly planted in your mind.
Can you give me an example of what one of those non-negotiables is for you, and has it changed through your life, or is it something you've always kept?
Well, my biggest non-negotiable is my family. And, I've been married now for 40 years and I have 4 wonderful daughters and I have 7 wonderful grandchildren and another wonderful grandchild on the way. And we try to spend as much time as we can with our children. We try to spend as much time with our kids. We've been fortunate that our children all stayed in our own city. So we tried to get together with a different child every Sunday for dinner, which is an amazing compliment when you have people doing so many things in their lives that you actually can do that.
That is amazing. Yeah. Congratulations on the family that you've built, and congratulations on your newest grandchild that's coming into the world.
Yes, and that should be here any day now. So we're very excited about that. We have 7 grandchildren, 6 are girls, only one's a boy, and our newest grandchild's going to be a boy. So we're very excited about that.
That's incredible. Super cool. I want to ask you about how you work with people, both one-on-one and in a business sense. But before that, I can't leave this conversation with you without personally asking you. You're a very well-read individual. You've mentioned it several times now. You've got your library behind you. If Let me ask you this way. Was there a book that you've read at any point in your life where you could never go back and say, if I eliminated that one book that I read, I wouldn't be the person I am today? Is there one book that has touched you the most in your life?
I've been really influenced by the work of Napoleon Hill. Now, Napoleon Hill was an amazing author who studied all the richest people in the world, and he put their thoughts together and put down together the principles of living a fantastic life many, many years ago. And he called that book Think and Grow Rich. And in that book, he found the principles that made the richest people in the world, why they were so rich. So that is a book that I follow. I follow his principles. I read them every year, and I try to reread them because they are very basic principles that people need to know about.
Yes. Yeah, I read that book a long time ago when I was recommended it by a friend. And it's funny you mentioned that book because I'm actually rereading that book right now. And there's many different versions out there, many different ways you can get the book, but it is incredible. And I've barely scraped the surface on really diving into it. But it's funny that you mentioned that because I'm reading it as we speak right now. When did you read it for the first time in your life, though?
Probably in my early 20s. And I'm going to tell you, there's an amazing set of videos on YouTube of Napoleon Hill actually talking about his principles of Think and Grow Rich. And I'm going to encourage you to spend your time and listening to Napoleon Hill speak of those principles, because they'll make them come alive in a way that you would never have believed of.
Awesome. I'm going to check those out, and I'm sure other people are going to go check them out too. I'll include a link to one of those videos, guys, in the description so you can check one out too. If you're new to Napoleon Hill or you've been involved with his work in the past, either way, I'm going to check them out. So I hope you guys do too. So let me ask you this to wrap up our time, because I want to respect your time, Dr. Lycka. When you work with someone today, because you work with people in different capacities, you work with people one-on-one, you work with people when it comes to business coaching as well. What does it look like? Can you paint a picture of what it looks like to work with you as a personal coach for someone?
I start with them telling me about what it would be like if they were successful in all their areas. What it be like to be a person that got everything they wanted. So we start at the end and we work to the beginning. And then we work through the things, we start listing the things that are preventing them from getting there. So we start working on the list of things that might not be working for them. And then we go through the list of things that they want to do and maybe have not accomplished yet. Maybe they wanted to write a book. Maybe they wanted to speak from the stage. Maybe they wanted to do other things than their current job. And we start talking about those things as well. So again, we start with the end in mind and work back to the beginning. And that's how we start with painting the picture of where we want to be successful at.
When you're talking with people about what's holding them back from the end in mind that they have, I can only imagine there's one, maybe two things, but we'll focus on one right now. One thing that more people bring up than not. What is that one thing that you find that holds most people back in realizing that vision they have for themselves?
Many people are still entwined with something that happened in their childhood. Many people were abused as children. Many people came from a bad background. Many people had a situation like that, and they cannot get over it. They keep blaming that situation for where they are now. They literally cannot move forward because of what happened in their past. And that is the biggest detriment that everybody has to get over. And they need to move forward, because if they do not let that go, they will never move to the future.
Is there a process to let go of something that's happened in the past that you've helped people to move past and through that?
I asked everybody to look at my chapter on forgiveness in my book, because forgiveness is where it all starts. And Bill Clinton once asked Nelson Mandela, who had been imprisoned for 20 years for something that wouldn't even be thought of as a crime in this day and age, uh, was he mad for this imprisonment? And Nelson Mandela said, "Yes, I'm mad." He said, "But I forgive them, because I would never be free if I did not forgive them." And that's how you have to bring it together. You have to bring it with forgiveness. You have to bring it with a thing. Now, you forgive people not for the other person. You forgive a person for yourself. This is a selfish act, forgiveness, because you're forgiving people so you can grow and move forward.
That's powerful. It's very true. Very true. Guys, you got a lot of golden pearls to go check out for yourself in Dr. Lycka's book. And I want to know what your next chapter looks like in your own life. But before that, I know there's people listening who immediately know, they're saying, I want to work with this man because this man has seen a lot in his life. He's done a lot in his life. He's overcome a lot in his life. I want to work with him as my coach, my personal or business coach. Where is the best place for people to start that conversation with you?
The best place is go to my website, dralanlycka.com. That's DRALLEN, Lycka, LYCKA.com. And first of all, sign up for a golden pearl a week, because I send people a golden pearl a week there so people will integrate it into their life. Now, my personal assistant is a girl by the name of Tammy, Tami, and she can be reached at tammy@lycka.ca. And she can find a place in my schedule so we can put a discovery call together, so we can find out if you can work with me. And that call is free and comes without obligation, and is something that I really encourage you to do. Now, in addition, I'm going to be starting a couple of groups in the next month or two. One group is for entrepreneurs, and that group is going to be for people that want to develop their lives and businesses. So again, by signing up to my Golden Pearls, I'll be able to get in touch with you and tell you when it's happening. Also, follow me on social media, because you'll find this being announced there. Also, I'm starting a group called fantasticliving.ca, where again, I'm starting groups to help people with their lives and make their lives better. And for doctors and nurses, I'm starting a group for them in the near future.
Wow.
So that I'll be doing this. In addition, I'm going to be starting retreats for people so that people can get away for 1 week and spend that time with me, so that they can learn more and heal themselves and move forward in that week faster than they ever did before in their lives. So that's what's on the schedule for the next year and the years to come.
First of all, incredible. And everyone, you'll find that information again at dralanlycka.com. And I just want to ask you this question. Why do you do all these different things, retreats and groups and coaching and books and podcasts, when you could just be retired and, do the things in the yard, see your many children with the many grandchildren? Why do you continue to fill your calendar at this point in your life?
I think again, that has to come from you knowing who you are and knowing what you want to do. My definition of being retired is totally different than what others' definitions is. My definition is to do what you want to do rather than what you have to do. So by doing what you want to do, you really make things that much better. And so that's why I look at things and have decided that I want to do things in a certain way and make my life different than everybody else's. So if I'm alive for 1 year or 20 years or 100 years, these are the things I'm going to do to make my life that much better.
That's amazing. Well, you've inspired me today. You've already inspired many people, and I know that you're inspiring people right now in this moment because they're commenting, letting me know you're inspiring them. And for everyone listening to the replay, I hope the same goes for you as well. But Dr. Alan Lycka, it has been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming and speaking to our audience. And I am looking forward to seeing everything that you launch in the near future here. Obviously, there's many of those things, and I wish you nothing but the best with those things. And thank you very much, sir. It's been a pleasure having you here.
It really was my pleasure to be here today. And to your listeners, if I can be of further help in any way, please rate me. I'd love to hear from you. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your problems, and I'll see if I can connect the dots and make things better for you as well.
Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate you.
Bye for now. Have a fantastic day.
I hope you found a ton of value from that conversation. I know I have. I took a lot away just with the golden pearls that Dr. Lycka did share, talking about forgiveness and gratitude and enthusiasm and so many other things, purpose, how you can find your purpose, trying many different things. There's a ton for you to go back and rewind and revisit whatever makes the most sense for you. And that's all aside from him sharing his story in general with a lot of different nuggets of wisdom in his story. Again, you can connect with Dr. Alan Lycka at dralanlycka.com. Sign up for his newsletter where you'll be sent a different pearl every single week with stories and lessons behind that as well. But remember, he offers coaching for you, coaching for your business. There's many different projects he's working on coming up, so be sure to follow him there. And hey, if you want to see the rest of those golden pearls and apply them in your life, his book title is The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life. Links are in the description to see and visit all of those things, as well as Napoleon Hill's principles. They'll be down there as well. And if you took anything from this conversation, a new insight, a new strategy, maybe we made you laugh, maybe we made you smile, then please share this show with just one other person. You're the reason that this show has gone on to several hundred episodes, reaching more people every day, because you are the best part of the Be Better team. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until you and I talk again, continue to be better.